Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. We've got a lot to get to today, including an unexpected box office upset, or what seems to be a box office upset, with Beetlejuice staying number one for a third weekend and Transformers 1 opening at number 2. We've got a lot to break down about those numbers. Before I get to that, though, I just want to remind everyone that memberships are now open here on the channel. You can find the button down there. There's also a link in the description below. If you choose to join, that means that you'll get custom badges when you comment. There's custom emoji. Some of my reviews that I did last week were available to members early before anyone else got them. This show, once I get back into a routine, will likely be early on a lot of weeks for channel members. So if you want to jump in just a little bit more here on the channel and become a member, that'd be great. We had a lot of people that joined last week. I'd love to see more members join. I'm doing polls that only members can vote in. It's a lot of fun. So I'd love to see you become a member of the channel. But if not, I'm just happy that you're here and that you're watching. So let's go now to the box office top 10 for this past weekend. And as I mentioned, it was an upset because most people just assumed that Transformers 1 was going to open at number 1, but it underperformed expectations, and Beetlejuice continues to hold well, which means as of the estimated numbers, the number 1 spot does go to Beetlejuice with $26 million, a drop of less than 50% in its third week, with Transformers 1 coming in second place at $25 million. Now, it is possible that if Warner Brothers overestimated Beetlejuice just a bit and Paramount underestimated Transformers 1 just a little bit, that there could be a flip there. Now, the thing here that is saving Transformers 1 just a little bit is that it had a much lower budget than most Transformers films. It had a budget of around $75 million. So if we're talking about a profit situation, they're not in terrible trouble. But if you're talking about a brand situation, they had to have hoped that a more kid-centric Transformers film would post a stronger opening, and it just kind of contributes to the concept or the idea that this is potentially a franchise in decline or one that needs a rejuvenation. This movie was supposed to be that rejuvenation, but the audience hasn't really turned out as yet. Now, family films, movies that are aimed towards kids, a lot of times they will have long legs at the box office. So if this movie holds well, we could see it get to a respectable domestic total. But it is a disappointing opening for a film that I think Paramount was hoping might be a new door for where to go with these Transformers films. In third place was Speak No Evil, which brought in $5.9 million in its second weekend, a drop of 48.2%. It was an underwhelming opening last week, but that's a pretty good hold, especially for a horror thriller. Its domestic total is now at $21.4 million. Never Let Go opens in fourth place at $4.5 million. This is the latest letdown for Lionsgate as a producer/distributor, and they've got another one potentially on deck with Megalopolis. They have had a horrible last few months. Deadpool and Wolverine stays in the top 5 at number 5 with $3.9 million. Its domestic total is now at $627.2 million. In sixth place was The Substance at $3.1 million. If you saw my review of the movie last week, you'll know that I liked it, but I also understand that it is a very divisive film. And the interesting thing about The Substance is that it had to change distributors midstream. Originally, Universal was going to distribute the film along with working title, but they dropped the movie because apparently they were concerned about it. They thought it was too extreme. They didn't know if audiences would want to go see it, if they could market it probably. So it ended up going with the distributor Mubi, which is also a streaming service. I think that Universal could have gotten the movie to a stronger opening, but they would have had to put more marketing money into it, and it's obviously something they didn't want to do. We have Mubi. It did put it in a wide release, not a platform release. I have to respect them for doing that. I hope that they're able to manage an awards campaign for the movie. They had one for Decision to Leave, which I thought was a great movie and did not end up getting an Academy Award nomination for Best International Film. I get it. This is a divisive film. I think it was good that it went into wide release. But, you know, for a studio like Universal to lose faith in it, and it's a movie that I think is going to be at least a contender for many major awards, I don't know. You see some of the stuff that Universal does put their name on. It's like, you know, whatever. I guess that's their choice to make. In seventh place was the documentary Am I Racist? In its second week of release, it dropped 44.2% for a $2.5 million total. Its domestic total is now at just over $9 million. The biopic Reagan comes in eighth place in its fourth week of release with $1.6 million. Its domestic total is now at $26.5 million. In ninth place is another documentary, Jungkook I Am Still, which is at $1.4 million. It's made $2.5 million since it opened earlier earlier in the week last week. It's a documentary about the BTS star as he embarks on a solo tour prior to his mandated military service for South Korea. And rounding out the top 10 is Alien Romulus, which brought in $1.3 million in its sixth week of release. We'll see if this is its last week in the top 10. Given the slate of movies coming up this weekend, I think it most likely is. So let's look at some of the movies that are in the top 10, and we'll start with what appears to be the number one movie of the weekend, which is Beetlejuice, and it is climbing up the chart as far as Tim Burton's highest grossing films domestically. Now, this is unadjusted for inflation, but it is now above Charlie and the Chocolate Factory at number 3, and it is rapidly approaching 1989's Batman for number 2. I don't know if it has enough in the tank to take on Alice in Wonderland, but it looks like it is going to be a comfortable number 2 on Tim Burton's all-time list. And speaking of number 2, it is also number 2 on the highest grossing September releases of all time. It is now behind It, which is the number 1 movie at $327.4 million. Beetlejuice is there at number 2 at $226.8 million. It jumped over Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings and It Chapter 2 over the past week to grab that number 2 spot. Turning our attention now to the Transformers franchise, Transformers 1 was able to avoid having the lowest opening in modern Transformers history at $25 million. That puts it above Bumblebee, which opened to $21.6 million. Of course, it's well ahead of the original The Transformers the movie back in 1986, which is a completely different era. But it comes in well below all of the Michael Bay Transformers films and brought in less than half of Transformers Rise of the Beasts, which opened just last summer. So yes, it is an indication that there is waning interest in the Transformers franchise, but also it didn't really seem like they were able to capture the market they were going for an animated Transformers film. They didn't quite get the family audience. They didn't quite bring back the older audience. And I think that this was an interestingly marketed film. When I saw it, I thought it skewed much younger than it actually ended up being. So I think that Paramount's got to go back and look at how they sold this film, because whatever audience they did capture, I don't think it was the audience they were looking to capture. And oftentimes, especially when the movie has gotten good reviews, that's a marketing problem. When we look at Transformers openings adjusted for inflation, it does come in just below Bumblebee at $25 million versus Bumblebee's adjusted total of $27.1 million. Transformers Revenge of the Fallen remains the highest opening Transformers film adjusted for inflation at $159.8 million, followed by Dark of the Moon and Age of Extinction. And I think those are three of the worst Transformers films. That's another problem with the franchise. The movies that did well weren't particularly well regarded, and so they made the money, but they kind of poisoned the well for a lot of movies that came after them. Looking at the domestic box office total for all Transformers films, you can see that Transformers 1 does have a bit of a steep ladder to climb, because it's going to have to put up about another $102 million in order to climb above Bumblebee to avoid being the lowest grossing Transformers film in the modern era. Transformers Last Night is at number 6. Revenge of the Fallen is also the highest grossing Transformers film domestically. And when we look at the Transformers franchise adjusted for inflation, Transformers 1 has about another $125 million if it wants to get up above Bumblebee. I don't really see how that's going to happen, but again, you never know. Stranger things have happened at the box office. Look at that adjusted total for Revenge of the Fallen: $568 million, $475 million for Dark of the Moon, $467 for the first Transformers franchise, and then you have that drop off starting with Age of Extinction, going down to The Last Night, and then Rise of the Beast. You can see the interest waning, often by dramatic degrees from movie to movie. Deadpool and Wolverine is still in the top 5, as we have long ago transitioned from the summer movie season, and it's still moving up the franchise chart for the MCU. It has now passed the Avengers to become the 5th highest grossing film in MCU history. I don't think it's got another $50 million in the tank, so I think that's where it's going to stay. But still, a top 5 MCU movie, and also the first one with an R rating. That is a pretty impressive feat for the film to pull off. It's also matched Dune Part 2's run in the top 10, so it's tied for 3rd as far as longest runs in the top 10 for 2024. If it can stay in the top 10 next week, it will tie Kung Fu Panda 4 and Despicable Me 4 for the 2nd longest run. And if it can stay in the top 10 for 2 more weeks, then it will tie Inside Out 2 for the longest run of the year so far. And speaking of Inside Out 2, this is the race for number 1 in summer of 2024, and this is probably the last week I'm going to keep track of it, because you can see that Inside Out 2 has maintained and opened up a bigger lead against Deadpool and Wolverine as they have both gotten into sort of the extended parts of their summer run. And I think it's because Inside Out 2 has the family rating, it had summer weekdays, and it had better legs, more repeat business. Nothing wrong with the box office performance of either one of these movies. They're both huge hits, but it looks very safe that it's going to be close, but that Inside Out 2 is going to remain the number one movie of summer 2024. Dropping out of the top 10 this week, It Ends With Us ends its impressive run in the top 10 after 6 weeks. It is a top 10 summer movie, so nothing to complain about there. The Forge ends a 4-week run in the top 10, and then after just 1 week, The Killer's Game, which was the last disappointing opening from Lionsgate last weekend, drops out, as well as God's Not Dead and God We Trust, which is also out of the top 10 after 1 week. When we look at the biggest theater count changes for this past weekend, The Front Room in the dreaded third week drops 1,524 theaters. It's now in only 98 theaters, so distributors, again, getting rid of that movie as quickly as they can. It Ends With Us dropped about half of its theaters, 1,045 of them. It's still in 1,164. Twisters drops out of wide release. It drops 749 theaters. It's still in 650. Despicable Me 4 also dropping out of wide release. It lost about half of its theaters. It dropped 720 theaters with 796 remaining. And Deadpool and Wolverine is starting to shed theaters in bigger numbers. It lost 625 theaters. It's still playing in 2,450. Looking at what I call the road to recovery, the red line there is the box office weekend average for 2021 to 2023. The blue line is the box office weekend average for 2015 through 2019. And then the dotted black line is the weekend performance for every weekend this year. And you can see that we are well below still where we traditionally have been on this weekend pre-pandemic, but we're also fairly high above where we have been since theaters reopened. We'll see if things spike this upcoming weekend with movies like The Wild Robot hitting theaters. The highest grossing film for the 2021 to 2023 window is the continued run of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. The highest grossing film for the 2015 to 2019 window was the opening of Kingsman: The Golden Circle. Looking outside the domestic marketplace now, and at all markets outside of the US and Canada, these were the top 5 films internationally. Beetlejuice remained number 1 at $17.2 million. Transformers 1 came in second place with $14 million. However, this is not a day-and-date global rollout, as Optimus Prime might like to say. It still has a number of key markets where it hasn't opened, including China. So this is not necessarily a alarm bells, red flag opening on the international side, only because there's so many countries left to go. In third place is the South Korean film Veteran 2, I, the Executioner, which brings in $8.5 million. Then we have Speak No Evil in fourth place at $7.3 million. And The Wild Robot, which began its rollout this past weekend around the world, comes in fifth place at $6.8 million. When you take the domestic grosses, you combine them with those international grosses, we get our top 5 films worldwide. And the number 1 movie in the world was Beetlejuice, which dropped 46.2% from the previous weekend, another $43.2 million. It is approaching Tim Burton's top 5 highest grossers worldwide. Transformers 1 brought in $39 million worldwide, followed by Speak No Evil, which brings in $13.2 million, a drop of about 36.5%. Then we have Veteran 2, I, the Executioner, with $8.5 million, a drop of about 43.1%. And finally, Deadpool and Wolverine, which drops 33% and brought in $7.3 million worldwide over the past weekend. When we look at the Transformers franchise worldwide, Transformers 1 has a lot of work to do if it wants to avoid being the lowest grossing Transformers film in the modern era. About $400 million more is needed if it wants to one-up Transformers Rise of the Beast from last summer to take that number 7 spot. Bumblebee's at number 6. And then, of course, we have at the top the 2 Transformers films, which brought in over $1 billion worldwide. That would be Dark of the Moon, the highest grossing Transformers film worldwide at $1.123 billion. And then Transformers Age of Extinction, which famously overcame a disappointing domestic performance to still make $1.1 billion around the world, largely due to the franchise's success in China. We've got a lot more to break down, but before we do, I want to thank the sponsors for this week's show. This video is brought to you by The Perfect Jean. September means football season for a lot of people, but for me, that means it's blue jean season. Well, every season is blue jean season for me, but it's definitely the time of year to break out those long pants and get ready for cooler temperatures. If you're looking for that perfect pair of jeans, I have the perfect solution, The Perfect Jean. It's right there in the name. These are the most comfortable jeans I've ever worn, and I've worn a lot of jeans over the years. And it doesn't matter what size you are, The Perfect Jean has a massive range of sizes and fits fits, so you will absolutely find the pair that's perfect for you. I've had a couple of those transition days where it's warmer during the day and cooler at night, and my jeans worked great in both conditions, breathable and flexible in the sun, but thick enough to keep me warm at night. When laundry day rolls around, my pair of perfect jeans is always the first one I grab. It's finally time to stop putting up with uncomfortable jeans by going to theperfectjean.nyc. Our listeners get 15% off your first order, including free shipping, free returns, and free exchanges when you use code DAN15 at checkout. That's 15% off for new customers at theperfectjean.nyc with promo code DAN15. After you purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them, so please support the show and tell them that I sent you. F your khakis and get the perfect jean. This video is brought to you by Miracle Made. The leaves are changing and the nights are getting cooler, and you've heard me talk about how Miracle Made sheets keep me cool in the summer, but they also keep you warm as the temperatures start to drop. That's because Miracle Made sheets are thermoregulating, which means they're designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long, no matter what the temperature is, using silver-infused fabrics inspired by NASA. Not only do they keep you comfortable so you can get a good night's sleep every night, they're also self-cleaning, preventing up to 99.7% of bacterial growth and staying fresh 3 times longer than other sheets, while staying as comfortable as the sheets that you'll find in a lot of fancy hotels. Go to trymiracle.com/Dan to try Miracle Made sheets today, and whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40% off. And if you use our promo code Dan at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/Dan and use the code Dan to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/Dan to treat yourself. Thanks to Miracle Made for sponsoring this episode. All right, let's dive down a little bit deeper into this week's box office. But before we do, I actually want to go back and revise a couple of things from last week's show. One of them is the box office top 5. There was a compilation error on the part of the box office reporting sites where the Sunday grosses for Deadpool and Wolverine were not added into the total gross, which means that it was listed as the number 4 film instead of the number 3 film. This is the revised top 5 for September 13th through 15th. We have Beetlejuice at number 1, followed by Speak No Evil at number 2. Then we have Deadpool and Wolverine at number 3 with that revised total of $5.2 million, followed by Am I Racist, which actually debuted in 4th place instead of 3rd place where I had it listed last week at $4.5 million, with Reagan rounding out the top 5. And honestly, I don't know what's been going on with these box office reporting sites. They are a huge part, obviously, of what I do here every week. And for the last couple months, 2 or 3 months, there have been a lot of errors, theater count changes that are wrong, grosses that are wrong, things that are carried over from the previous week. This compilation error that we're talking about here, mismatched numbers across the 2 sites. It makes my job a lot harder, and quite honestly, I would appreciate it if these sites got their business together, because I'm having to cross-check against 2, 3, 4 different sources just because you can't rely on those numbers. It's difficult. It's very, very hard. I wish I had access to that raw data so I didn't rely on those sites as much. I don't have access to that data, and so I have to kind of go with what they've got listed. And we need to get things together, guys, because you're making it harder for a lot of the box office analysts out here, other box office analysts that rely on you to do our jobs. One other quick revision from last week's show, and it was for the per theater average. The top 4 were the same, with My Old Ass bringing in $23,979 in 7 theaters, followed by Beetlejuice, the re-release of Basquiat, and Music for Mushrooms. But coming in 5th place was the documentary Just a Bit Outside. I can only say that and hear that in Bob Uecker's voice. The story of the 1982 Milwaukee Brewers. It ended up bringing in $4,423 in 14 theaters, which displaced Speak No Evil's debut. Sometimes we see that with these smaller releases, these documentaries, the numbers trickle in. That's why we do the revisions here on the show. All right, let's turn back to this past weekend's box office, and we'll start here with the per theater average. At number 1 was A Different Man, starring Sebastian Stan, which brought in $14,000 in 4 theaters. This was a buzzy film. I actually would have expected that per theater average to be just a little bit higher. In 2nd place is the documentary Happy Clothes, a film about Patricia Field. It's about costume designer Patricia Field, who won an Emmy for Sex and the City and was Oscar nominated for The Devil Wears Prada. That film played in just 1 theater. theater. In third place was My Old Ass, which expanded to 33 theaters and brought in $8,540 per theater. It expands nationwide this upcoming weekend. Transformers 1 comes in fourth place, bringing in $6,284 per theater in 3,978 theaters. Its lower theater count and similar gross to Beetlejuice means that it has the slight edge as far as the per theater average. And then in fifth place is Beetlejuice, which brought in $6,232 per theater in each of its 4,172 theaters. Looking at films in limited release, which I define as 1,000 theaters or fewer, Jungkook, I Am Still is at number 1. It played in 769 theaters and brought in $1.4 million. Then we had the 10th anniversary re-release of Whiplash, which brought in $578,000 in 695 theaters. That was actually, I think, 2014 when that movie came out. That was my second favorite film of the year. I think I put Boyhood at number 1. If I was going to reevaluate that list, I think I might flip-flop that and put Whiplash at number 1. I actually rewatched it not too long ago. That is a solid movie. I really like that movie. In third place is My Old Ass in 33 theaters at $281,000. In fourth place is The Critic, which played in 113 theaters, bringing in $70,000. I haven't seen this movie, but from what I've heard, it stinks. I actually don't know if it's good or not. It probably is. I just, anytime I see a chance to make a critic joke, I'm going to make it. And then in fifth place is A Different Man in its 4 theaters, which brought in just over $50,000. Looking at the 2024 fall holiday box office chart, which is everything after Labor Day to the end of the year, Beetlejuice, the easy number 1 at $226 million. Then we have Transformers 1, which debuts in that second spot at $25 million. Speak No Evil drops down 1 spot to number 3. Am I Racist drops down 1 spot to number 4. Then we have The Killer's Game staying at number 5. Never Let Go debuts on the chart at number 6, followed by The Greatest of All Time, which drops 3 spots to number 7. The Substance debuts on the chart at number 8. The Front Room drops down 3 spots to number 9. And Jungkook, I Am Still is number 10 on the list overall. So we have a full fall holiday box office chart here. And of course, those spots will be taken up by a lot of the bigger releases in the weeks to come. Looking at the 2024 annual box office chart, as I mentioned last week, Beetlejuice has now jumped up to number 6, 3 spots up from last week at $226.8 million. That knocks down Godzilla Kong, The New Empire, Kung Fu Panda 4, and Bad Boys Ride or Die down 1 spot each. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes remains at number 10. And Beetlejuice is only about $40 million away from overtaking Twisters to become the number 5 movie of the year. The top 4 remain the same, with Inside Out 2, Deadpool and Wolverine, Despicable Me 4, and Dune Part 2 locking down those positions. Before we look at the streaming numbers, as I often do, I want to take a look at a weekend in box office history, and we're going to go back to September 18th through the 20th, 2009, 15 years ago, which saw the debut of Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs at $30.3 million. Lord and Miller breaking into the animation scene. There's still big numbers on the animation scene. That movie eventually made $124.8 million domestically. In second place was the Matt Damon, Steven Soderbergh film The Informant, which debuted to $10.4 million. I haven't seen The Informant. Literally, the only thing I remember about that movie is that poster, which is honestly a pretty good poster. In third place was the Tyler Perry film I Can Do Bad All By Myself, which had a steep 57.9% drop in weekend number 2, bringing in $9.8 million. Its final domestic total was just over $50 million. In fourth place was the Aaron Eckhart, Jennifer Aniston film Love Happens, which seems to be kind of a spoiler to me. I don't know why you put it right in the title. It opened to just over $8 million, brought in a final domestic total of $22.9 million. And then rounding out the top 5 was Jennifer's Body, which opened to $6.8 million. Its final total was at $16.2 million, considered a disappointment for that time. And I can't think of a movie, there are very few movies, I should say, in the last 15 years that have had a reevaluation as drastic as Jennifer's Body. I think that some people that have seen it in more recent times that maybe don't remember when it came out might be surprised to know that that was not a well-regarded film when it was released, largely because it was mismarketed, because people were buying into what they thought Megan Fox should be or what they thought her role would be in a movie like that. And this is why I always say that the box office opening weekend isn't everything. The box office domestic total isn't everything. Time is the final factor that will judge these movies as far as their actual reception. How do people feel about them? And that's why, when people say, well, why do you love box office numbers so much? I love it because I'm a stats nerd, and I think that it's important as far as the news and how people react to a film when it first comes out. But it's not the end all be all. And the important thing is really, what a movie makes you feel and makes other people feel. And Jennifer's Body is a great example of that. The box office doesn't tell the story on that movie, and it doesn't tell the story on a lot of movies. Let's jump now from the box office to the streaming charts, and we will start with the latest available data from Netflix. This is for September 9th through the 15th, and Rebel Ridge had a great second week. It was one of those movies that had a strong debut and built on that debut in week number 2. 84.9 million hours watched and 38.59 million views in its second week. That's very impressive. The Perfect Couple comes in second place with 21.88 million views. Then we have the debut of the Netflix original film Uglies, which brought in 20 million views over its first few days, followed by Emily in Paris Season 4. The second half of that fourth season debuted and brought it to 11.55 million views overall, although keep in mind that is weighed against the entire run of Season 4. If you were going to break down everything just by that second drop of episodes, it'd probably be somewhat higher, but Netflix does not provide that data. In fifth place is Officer Black Belt, an action comedy from South Korea about an officer whose job it is to find people wearing ankle monitors and track down offenders. It brought in 8.3 million views. Then in sixth place, we have the film Outlaw, which is a Brazilian film about a young girl's rise in the world of drug gangs. It brought in 8.29 million views. In seventh place was the docuseries Into the Fire, The Lost Daughter, about a woman searching for her daughter who disappeared decades ago. That brought in just over 8 million views. Then we have The Deliverance, which is a holdover from last week's chart at 6.96 million views. Hobbs and Shaw comes in ninth place at 5.78 million views. And The Day After Tomorrow, which is rapidly becoming more of a documentary in many ways, brought in 5.6 million views to round out the top 10. And when we look at the best weekly performances for movies in 2024 on Netflix, Rebel Ridge actually had the fifth best weekly performance of any film this year at 38.59 million views in its second week of release. That comes in under The Union's second week, which brought in 40.6 million views. Then the first week of Under Paris, which brought in 40.9 million views. The first week of Beverly Hills Cop Axel F, which brought in 41 million views. And then Damsel's second week, which is easily still the best weekly performance on Netflix this year, which brought in 50.8 million views in its second week of availability. And Rebel Ridge has done enough in its first couple weeks to break onto the top 10 most watched Netflix movies of 2024 at 69.77 million views. That drops Trigger Warning out of the top 10. Mother of the Bride, Atlas, Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F, and A Family Affair are at numbers 9 through 6. Then we have Society of the Snow at number 5. Lift moves down to number 4, with The Union now becoming the third movie of the year to surpass 100 million views. It's at 102.75 million. And it's actually just underneath Under Paris, so it should hit that number 2 spot next week if it can stay on the top 10. It may drop off the top 10, we'll see. Damsel remains the most watched movie on Netflix so far this year at 138 million views. When we look at the most watched shows on Netflix in 2024, I mentioned that Emily in Paris had its numbers kind of watered down by that addition of the second part of season 4. It drops out of the top 10, and The Perfect Couple jumps onto the top 10 at 42.18 million views. We'll see if the watch time for the second part of season 4 for Emily in Paris is enough to get it back in that top 10. The rest of the top 10 remains the same, with Bridgerton Season 3 remaining the only Netflix show so far this year to get over 100 million views. We'll see if Baby Reindeer got a boost from its Emmy wins. And when we look at the overall most watched programs of 2024 on Netflix, Damsel is at number 1, followed by Bridgerton Season 3 and Under Paris. But The Union moves up to number 4 and is rapidly closing in on that number 3 spot, with Lift moving down to number 5. The rest of the top 10 remains the same, with Society of the Snow, Fool Me Once, Baby Reindeer, A Family Affair, and Beverly Hills Cop Axel F. Let's move on now to the Nielsen numbers. Now, these are different from the Netflix numbers in that they are domestic here in the US and not global. They're also delayed by about a month because Nielsen needs that time to crunch the numbers and get the data together. And let's look first at the most watched streaming movies for the week of August 19th through the 25th. The Union extends its run at number 1 with 18.8 million hours watched, followed by Migration at 11.2 million hours watched over on Netflix. Amazon's Jackpot remains at number 3 at 5.6 million hours watched, with Furiosa: A Mad Max Saga at number 4 and The Emoji Movie at number 5. When the release for Horizon and American Saga Chapter 2 was delayed, one of the reasons Warner Brothers gave was that they wanted the movie to find an audience on streaming. Well, the first week of those numbers doesn't look very promising because Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1 comes in at 3.7 million hours watched over on Max. And keep in mind, that is a long movie. So you would think that the watch time might be a little bit higher. Maybe that audience will continue to build, but it didn't have a huge debut when it came to streaming numbers. Logan Lucky on Netflix comes in at number 7 at 3.6 million hours watched, followed by the original Netflix film Incoming at 3.5 million hours watched. Moana is at number 9, and Trolls Band Together rounds out the top 10 with 3.35 million hours watched. Through 2 weeks of Nielsen numbers, which would be through August 25th, The Union is now the 8th most watched streaming movie of the year, which bumps Hitman down to number 9 and Lift to number 10. A Family Affair is now out of the top 10 altogether, and you can see that The Union is pretty close to movies like Roadhouse and Inside Out, so we'll see how it does next week and if it will continue to climb up this list. And when we look at the 10 most watched streaming shows according to Nielsen for August 19th through the 25th, Prison Break is at number 1 with $23.8 million, continuing to enjoy its second streaming life. Then we have Bluey at number 2. Dark Winds debuts on the list at number 3. This was a 2022 AMC series about 2 Navajo cops attempting to solve a grizzly murder, not a grizzly bear murder, like a grizzly kind of murder. 15.4 million hours watched. Family Guy comes in 4th place, followed by Grey's Anatomy. A Discovery of Witches on Netflix debuts at number 6. This is a Sky TV series that ran for 3 seasons based on the Deborah Harkness All Souls trilogy. The show starred Matthew Goode and Teresa Palmer. The Umbrella Academy is in 7th place, followed by Fire Country in 8th, Emily in Paris in 9th, and Dexter rounding out the top 10. When we look at the top 20 Nielsen streaming shows, as far as watch time per available episode, American Murder Lacey Peterson remains at number 1 with 3.42 million hours watched per episode, followed by Dark Winds at number 2 with 1.29 million hours watched per episode. Wyatt Earp and the Cowboy Wars on Netflix comes in at 1.19 million hours watched per episode. They released 6 episodes of that show. Then we have The Accident on Netflix, a 10-episode series which brought in just over 900,000 hours per episode. Love is Blind UK comes in 5th place at just under 700,000 hours per episode, followed by A Discovery of Witches at number 6, Fire Country at number 7, The Umbrella Academy at number 8, Emily in Paris at number 9, and Prison Break, even though it has 90 episodes, the highest episode count on this list, still making the top 10 at 265,000 hours per episode. That means a lot of people are watching a lot of Prison Break. One revision on the overall 2024 list for Nielsen ratings. These are the most watched library streaming series of the year. Bluey, Grey's Anatomy, and NCIS remain the top 3, but Family Guy moves up to be the 4th most watched library streaming show of the year at 324.4 million hours. Young Sheldon moves down to number 5. The top 6 through 10 remain the same, with Criminal Minds, Suits, Bob's Burgers, Your Honor, and House of the Dragon. But Bluey really remains the dominant series of the year at 652.6 million hours watched versus Grey's Anatomy's 557.4. And I've been looking at the overall most watched library streaming series since Nielsen started reporting ratings. Bluey is slowly creeping up that list, so stay tuned. And that does it for the show this week. Taking a quick look at some of the things that are getting released this upcoming week. First of all, on Wednesday night is the second night of the Fathom event for Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. I had tickets to go see it on Saturday. I was taking care of a lot of stuff, settling some business with my old house, so I ended up not being able to see it. I will be seeing it on Wednesday, and I will get a review out here on the channel. I'm very much looking forward to it. Also on Wednesday on Netflix is the debut of the docuseries Mr. McMahon, which takes a close look at Vince McMahon's run at the WWE. That is sure to be an interesting watch. And then finally on Wednesday is the premiere of Grotesquerie on FX. It's the latest Ryan Murphy series starring Niecy Nash as a detective attempting to solve a string of murders with the help of a nun. Looking at what's hitting theaters this week, on Friday we have the opening of The Wild Robot from DreamWorks Animation. It's been getting a lot of very positive buzz. I'll be checking that out and bringing you a review here on the channel. Also on Friday, hitting select markets is Megalopolis, the latest from Francis Ford Coppola. One of the movies I'm the most curious about. I'm actually hitting the road to see it later today. I will have a review for you here on the channel, most likely tomorrow, because I can't wait to see this movie. I have to see what's going on with this movie. Aubrey Plaza's in Megalopolis. She's also in My Old Ass, which hits wide release this upcoming weekend. I already have a review for that movie here on the channel. I really, really liked it. If you want to know more, you can check out that review, and you can check out the movie. I hope it's playing in a theater near you. Howl's Moving Castle has a 20th anniversary re-release hitting theaters this weekend. It's a Studio Ghibli movie I actually just recently saw for the first time. It's very good. I kind of wish I'd waited to see it on the big screen for the first time. Starting its platform rollout and limited release this weekend is Saturday Night, the dramatized behind-the-scenes look at the first episode of Saturday Night Live. I can't wait for this movie. I'm going to be able to see it, I think, a little bit early if I hit the road again, which I plan on doing because this is one of my most anticipated, if not my most anticipated movie of the fall. Wolves was a movie that was supposed to be in theaters everywhere, but Apple TV Plus decided to scale back the theatrical release and put it on streaming. It will be hitting the streaming service this Friday, so if you wanted to see Wolves and you were hoping to see it in theaters, you can at least see it at home this weekend. Another streaming movie that's hitting this weekend is Apartment 7A on Paramount Plus, the prequel to Rosemary's Baby, so add that to the watch list. Also hitting streaming on Netflix this Friday is a movie called Resball about a high school with deep ties to Native American culture that fights to win a championship. And finally on Friday, all is right with the world because the Great British Bake Off returns to Netflix here in the US. I think our good friends over in the UK get it a little bit early. This is one of my favorite times of the year because I love the Great British Bake Off. It's a great weekly watch, and the new season is heading your way this week. Finally, coming up on this curated list of things that are coming out this week, on Sunday, one of the longest show names I've ever heard of, The Book of Carol, The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon, will be premiering on AMC. Carol will be rejoining Daryl. They're in France, I think. I don't know. I've really lost track of what's going on with The Walking Dead, but if you haven't, then the latest chapter hits AMC this Sunday. And that does it for the show this week. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks to our sponsors, Miracle Made and The Perfect Gene. You can find out more about both of those down in the description below. You can also find out how to join and become a member of the channel in the description below. Stay tuned right here. I think it's going to be another busy week with movie reviews, most definitely, as well as potential movie news and all the other stuff that we cover. Thank you so much for spending part of your day here with me. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.